The phone rang at 1 a.m., shattering the silence in the dimly lit room. Jinwoo's hand froze mid-sip, the glass of whiskey still inches from his lips. He had built an empire from blood, sweat, and fear, a kingdom where his name alone could make grown men tremble. And yet, as that phone buzzed relentlessly on the polished oak table, his pulse quickened in a way he hadn't felt in years. It was her. His heart seemed to stop as he answered. "Ava," he whispered, his voice rough, raw. The name was like a ghost, haunting him. The woman who had walked away 7 months ago, the woman who had once been everything to him, was back. But this time, there was no softness in her voice. There was fear, urgency, and something else, something that sent a chill down his spine. "Jinwoo," she began, her voice cracking with emotion. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know who else to call. But she gasped, the words hanging in the air between them like a heavy weight. "I'm pregnant. It's your baby." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jinwoo leaned back in his chair, staring at the phone as if it might shatter. The woman he had once loved, the woman he had pushed away, was carrying his child. A child he hadn't known existed. His mind raced. How could this have happened? How had he missed it? And why was she calling now? Was it too late to fix everything they had broken? Was there still a chance for them? The world of power, money, and blood that he had built around him suddenly felt meaningless. The only thing that mattered was the one thing he had left to lose. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because, tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Jinwoo's hand trembled as he ended the call, the words still echoing in his mind. He dropped the phone onto the table and ran a hand through his dark hair, leaning back in the chair. The familiar weight of his power and authority felt like a burden now. How could he have been so blind? For 7 months he had lived in silence, the silence of a man who had buried everything that once mattered, everything that had once made him human. He had everything he could ever want: control, wealth, a network that stretched from Seoul's darkest corners to the city's tallest skyscrapers. But it had all come at a cost. Love had been a casualty. And Ava had been the casualty he'd never thought he'd mourn. Before her, he had ruled with an iron fist, and no one dared cross him. His reputation as Seoul's most feared Mafia boss had been carefully cultivated over the years. His empire was built on the backs of enemies who had made the mistake of underestimating him, of crossing the line. He was untouchable, or so he had believed. Then Ava came into his life, a whirlwind of beauty, warmth, and an unshakable strength that pierced through his hardened exterior. She wasn't like the other women who had come and gone. Ava saw him. Not the Mafia boss. Not the ruthless leader. She saw Jinwoo, the man beneath the power, the man who had buried his soul for so long. She loved him in a way he had never known, a love that made him feel human again. But it had been too much. He had pushed her away, believing he could protect her from the darkness of his world. He had told himself it was the only way, cutting ties before it could all fall apart. But now, staring at the phone, he realized that he had made the greatest mistake of his life. 7 months ago, the woman he loved walked away, leaving nothing but empty nights and a void he hadn't known existed. He had let her go, convinced that was the only choice, the only way to keep her safe. But in the wake of her departure, he felt his empire crumbling. For the first time, the loneliness that came with power, with control, was unbearable. And now this phone call. A child. His child. Jinwoo stood up abruptly, pacing across the room. His mind was racing. How could he have missed this? How could he have been so blind? And why didn't she tell him sooner? Was she trying to keep the child from him? Or was she just too afraid to come back into the chaos of his life? The door to his office creaked open, and his right-hand man, Taeyong, entered with a folder in his hand. He paused when he saw Jinwoo's face, knowing something was off. "Boss?" Taeyong asked, his voice cautious. Jinwoo turned, his expression hardening. "We need to find her. Now!" Taeyong's brow furrowed. "Who?" "Ava," Jinwoo growled, his voice low with a mix of frustration and urgency. "She's pregnant with my child. I need to find her. Now!" Taeyong froze, his face paling. "You mean Ava? From before? The one who left you?" "Yes," Jinwoo said, his voice a quiet snarl. "And I'll be damned if I let her disappear again." Taeyong hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, boss. I'll get on it right away." Jinwoo's gaze turned to the city skyline beyond the window. Seoul, his kingdom, stretched out before him, a city he had built on fear. But now it felt like a prison. All the power in the world meant nothing if he couldn't fix this, if he couldn't bring her back. The baby, his child, it was the only thing that mattered now. But was it too late? Was Ava gone forever? And what if she had already made her choice? What if she had already moved on, found a life without him? A part of him knew he couldn't blame her. But the other part, the part that had always been in control, was furious. Furious at himself for letting her slip away. Furious at the world for making him choose between power and love. The Mafia boss who had once controlled everything now found himself at the mercy of one phone call. As Taeyong left the room to begin his search, Jinwoo sank back into his chair, staring at the empty glass in front of him. He could still hear her voice, soft and desperate. "I'm pregnant." The words seemed to haunt him, repeating in his mind like a drumbeat. And then, in the silence, Jinwoo made a vow to himself. He would find her. He would make things right. He had no idea how he would do it, but he would not lose her again. He couldn't. What would you do if you discovered you had a child you never knew about? Would you drop everything to make things right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and frantic searches. Jinwoo's mind was consumed with one thought: Ava. He couldn't shake the image of her voice, shaky and uncertain, telling him she was carrying his child. A child he hadn't known about, a life that had been growing in secret. The idea of it gnawed at him, making his thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind. Despite his best efforts to keep his mind on business, everything seemed to fall away. His rivals grew bolder, sensing a crack in his armor, but Jinwoo was too consumed by his search for Ava to care. Taeyong had been working around the clock, but finding a woman in Seoul was like trying to catch the wind. She had vanished without a trace. Jinwoo knew her well. If she wanted to disappear, she would. No one could find her if she didn't want to be found. But something told him that she wasn't running away. Not this time. One night, just as Jinwoo was about to call it a day, he received a call that made his heart skip a beat. "Boss, we've found her," Taeyong said, his voice low but urgent. Jinwoo's breath caught in his chest. "Where is she?" "She's at a clinic." She's not doing well, boss." Taeyong hesitated, the words heavy. "She's in labor. The baby's coming." Jinwoo stood, the room suddenly feeling too small. His heart thudded in his chest, a rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. Ava. In labor. His child. He had no idea how to prepare for this moment. How to approach her, how to fix the mess they had both made. "Get the car ready," he said, his voice clipped. "I'm on my way." As the car sped through the night, Jinwoo couldn't help but replay every moment of their relationship in his mind. From the first time they met, her fiery independence clashing with his cold indifference, to the way she had made him laugh, made him feel. It had always been too easy to push her away, to justify his actions. But now, in the face of this child, his choices seemed so small, so meaningless. What kind of father would he be? A ruthless one? A cold one? Or could he find a way to be the man Ava needed him to be? The man he had failed to be all these months? The car pulled up in front of a small clinic on the edge of the city, far from the prying eyes of his enemies. Jinwoo's hands were shaking as he stepped out of the car, his mind spinning. The weight of everything he had ignored, everything he had pushed aside, seemed to collapse in on him. For the first time in years, he felt vulnerable. He walked briskly into the clinic, where Taeyong was already waiting. The look on his face said everything Jinwoo needed to know. This was serious. "She's in there," Taeyong said, nodding toward the door. "She won't see you yet, boss. She's been through a lot." Jinwoo didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could think about was getting to her, getting to the woman who had once been everything to him. His heart was pounding as he pushed the door open, stepping into the small, sterile room. And there she was. Ava lay on the hospital bed, her face pale but beautiful as ever. Her hair was tangled, her clothes rumpled, but her eyes held a depth of pain and exhaustion that made Jinwoo's heart clench. She looked up as he entered, her gaze sharp despite the weariness in her features. For a moment, the room seemed to freeze. No words, no sound, just the weight of everything they had both carried for so long. Jinwoo stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ava!" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, her hand reached up, trembling, and for a split second, Jinwoo thought she might push him away again. But then, she pulled herself up slightly, wincing in pain. "I didn't want this," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I didn't want to need you, but I couldn't do it alone, Jinwoo. I don't know who to trust anymore." The vulnerability in her voice broke something inside him. He had never wanted her to feel this way. Never wanted to make her feel alone, abandoned. She had left because of him, because of his empire, his world of lies and violence. But now, standing before her, seeing the mother of his child, he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away again. "I'm here," he said, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I'm not leaving. Not again. Not this time." Ava looked at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty, and for the first time, Jinwoo saw it clearly. The wall she had built around herself. The wall he had put up as well. They had both been living in fear. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was a flicker of something else, something like hope. I need you, Jinwoo," she whispered. "But I can't go back to what we were. Not unless you're willing to change." Jinwoo felt a pang in his chest. Change? Could he change? Could he be the man she needed him to be? He nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. "I'll do whatever it takes, Ava. For you. For our baby." Days blurred together in the small clinic as Jinwoo stayed by Ava's side. The tension between them was thick, heavy, like an invisible force that neither of them could escape. They spoke only when necessary, their interactions laced with an awkwardness neither of them had expected. Jinwoo knew he had a mountain to climb. He couldn't erase 7 months of silence in a few days. But being here, in this moment, with Ava and the child she carried, something inside him was beginning to shift. Ava was still recovering from the delivery, the exhaustion of labor weighing heavily on her, but there was an undeniable change in her. She had been so distant at first, keeping him at arm's length, but as the days passed, the walls between them began to crack, even if only slightly. It wasn't easy, though. Every time he reached out to her, whether to offer comfort, to talk about the baby, or just to check in, there was a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. He knew she didn't trust him. And why should she? He had broken her trust once, and now, he had to prove that he was worthy of it again. But there was something else. A subtle undercurrent of tension that neither of them was willing to acknowledge. Ava wasn't just recovering from childbirth. There was a quiet unease in the way she avoided his gaze sometimes, the way she flinched when the conversation veered toward the past. One night, as Jinwoo sat in the dimly lit room, watching her sleep, his mind drifted back to the phone call that had changed everything. The words she had spoken echoed in his mind again. "I didn't know who else to call." The thought gnawed at him. Why hadn't she called sooner? Why had she waited so long? Had she been afraid? Or had she been hiding something else? His thoughts were interrupted when Taeyong entered the room, his face grim. "Boss," Taeyong said, his voice low. "We've got a problem." Jinwoo stood immediately, his heart pounding. "What is it?" "There's someone looking for Ava," Taeyong explained, glancing at Ava, who was still asleep. "Someone from her past. They're asking questions, asking about her and the baby. We don't know who they are yet, but they're digging into her history, and it's not good. They're making threats." Jinwoo's eyes narrowed. "Threats? Who the hell would dare threaten her?" "We don't have all the details, but it looks like someone with ties to her old life. Someone dangerous." The room went silent as Jinwoo processed the information. Ava had never spoken much about her past before she met him. She had always been a mystery, someone with secrets buried deep within her. But now those secrets were surfacing. And someone, it seemed, was determined to find her, no matter what it took. "Have you found out who they are?" Jinwoo asked, his voice low but sharp. Taeyong shook his head. "Not yet, but we're working on it. We'll track them down. But boss, we need to act fast. If they're looking for her, it's only a matter of time before they find her. And we don't know how far they're willing to go." Jinwoo's mind raced. His instincts kicked in. He had spent his life surrounded by enemies, always one step ahead of them, always calculating the next move. But this was different. Ava was different. The child was different. He turned back to Ava, who was still asleep, her face peaceful despite the chaos unfolding around them. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her. He wanted to protect her, to keep her safe from everything, from the world he had created and from the people who were now hunting her. "Get the team ready," Jinwoo said, his voice cold, decisive. "We move her. Now." Taeyong nodded. "Understood. Where to?" Jinwoo's eyes darkened. "To the estate. The one in the mountains. No one knows about it. It's the safest place for her." "But boss," Taeyong hesitated. "There's no way to guarantee." "I don't need guarantees, Taeyong. I need her safe. And I will make sure nothing happens to her." Jinwoo's tone was final. "Get the car ready." As Taeyong left the room, Jinwoo walked over to the bed where Ava lay, her chest rising and falling with each breath. He could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight of everything she had carried alone for so long. His heart clenched. He wanted to tell her everything would be okay, that he would protect her no matter what. But deep down, he knew that this was just the beginning. He leaned over her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. "Ava," he whispered softly, his voice full of emotion. "I'm not letting you go again. We're leaving here, and I'm going to keep you and our baby safe. You have my word." Her eyelids fluttered open at the sound of his voice, and for the first time in days, she looked directly at him without turning away. There was something in her eyes, something like trust. Or maybe it was just hope. "I'm scared, Jinwoo," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What if I can't protect him? What if they come for us? What if it's too late?" Jinwoo's heart softened. He reached for her hand, holding it gently in his. "You don't have to do this alone anymore, Ava. We'll face this together. You, me, and our son. I won't let anyone hurt you." She closed her eyes, and for a brief moment, Jinwoo could see the weight lifting from her shoulders. He knew it wasn't much, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. Hope that he could fix what he had broken. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for them. When things get tough, who would you turn to for support? And would you trust them to keep you safe, no matter the cost? Let me know in the comments what you think. The days at the mountain estate were supposed to be a temporary refuge, a place of safety, a shield from the world that had been closing in around them. But even in the isolation of the vast, secluded property, Jinwoo couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The walls of the mansion, designed to keep enemies at bay, now felt like a cage. And no matter how far he ran, the ghosts of the past kept following. Ava was adjusting to life in the estate, though it was clear the weight of their situation was taking its toll on her. She was withdrawn, her mind always elsewhere, always haunted by the shadows of the past she hadn't shared with him. Jinwoo could see it in her eyes, the pain, the uncertainty, the guilt. She hadn't fully let him in. Not yet. And he was beginning to wonder if she ever would. It had been a week since they arrived, and Jinwoo had been handling the business side of things as he always did, keeping an eye on his empire while trying to protect his new family. But as much as he tried to focus on the task at hand, his thoughts always returned to Ava. He hadn't seen her smile in days, and that worried him more than he cared to admit. One evening, after a long day of strategizing with Taeyong, Jinwoo returned to the estate to find Ava sitting by the window, staring out at the mountainside, her face pale and drawn. She hadn't heard him approach, and for a moment he stood there in silence, watching her. There was something in the way she was sitting, so still, so quiet, that sent a chill through him. "Ava," he called softly, stepping into the room. She turned to face him, her eyes tired but determined. For a brief moment their gazes locked, and Jinwoo felt a strange pang in his chest. The connection between them was still there, but it felt like a distant memory, a shadow of what it once was. "I need to tell you something," Ava said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze shifted away from him, looking anywhere but at his face. "Something about my past. About why I left." Jinwoo's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment he had been dreading and hoping for at the same time. The moment that might reveal the truth behind the secrets she had been hiding. "I'm listening," he said, his voice low and steady, though his insides were a whirlwind of emotions. Ava took a deep breath before speaking, as though bracing herself for the storm. "I wasn't just running from you, Jinwoo. I wasn't just running from us." Her voice trembled slightly. "I was running from someone much worse." Jinwoo stepped closer, the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. "Who?" he asked, his voice edged with concern. "Ava, you need to tell me everything. I can help." Ava turned to look at him, her expression clouded with fear. "It's not that simple. The man I was with before you, he's not someone you want to cross. He's dangerous. He's the reason I left Seoul in the first place." Jinwoo felt the blood drain from his face. His mind raced. Who could she be talking about? She had never mentioned anyone in her life before him. He had assumed she was just trying to escape from the chaos of his world. But now it seemed there was something far darker lurking in her past. "Who is he?" Jinwoo demanded, his voice now tense, his thoughts spiraling. Ava's hands shook as she clasped them in her lap. "His name is Jang Miho. He's a part of a different organization, but just as powerful as yours. He's a psychopath, Jinwoo. He doesn't care about power or money. He only cares about control. And I'm the one he's been obsessed with for years. I thought he was gone. I thought he had forgotten about me." She paused, her voice breaking. "But he never forgets. He never lets go." Jinwoo's mind exploded with thoughts and questions. Jang Miho? Another criminal? Another mafia boss who ruled with fear? How had he not known about this? Ava had always been a mystery to him, But now, this was a whole new level of danger. Ava looked up at him, her eyes filled with guilt and fear. I never wanted to drag you into this, Jinwoo. I didn't want to bring this into your world. That's why I left. But now he knows about the baby. And he's coming for us. He won't stop until he gets what he wants. Jinwoo's blood ran cold. You should have told me sooner, Ava. I could have protected you. I couldn't, Jinwoo, she whispered. I didn't want you to get hurt. I didn't want you to have to choose between me and your empire. Jinwoo stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Ava, my empire means nothing compared to you. Nothing. And I'm not letting anyone, especially not Jang Miho, hurt you or our son. I will destroy him before I let him touch you. Ava shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. It's too late for that. He's already here. A heavy silence filled the room. Jinwoo's mind raced as his thoughts collided. If Jang Miho had already arrived in Seoul, there was no time to waste. They had to leave. They had to get away, before it was too late. But as Ava's words sank in, a more terrifying realization hit him. He had underestimated the danger. Jang Miho was far worse than anyone he had ever faced before. And now, with Ava and the baby at the center of it all, Jinwoo had no choice but to confront the very demons of his own past. The man who had once controlled everything now found himself facing an enemy who was even more dangerous than the one he had built his empire to fight. The days that followed were a blur of tension and urgency. Jinwoo's entire world shifted in an instant. The threat that had once seemed distant and abstract was now too close for comfort. Jang Miho was here. In Seoul. And he wasn't just coming for Ava, he was coming for everything. Jinwoo's mind churned with one single, obsessive thought: protect them. Protect Ava. Protect the baby. But the more he tried to control the situation, the more out of control it seemed to slip. The estate, once a sanctuary, had become a prison. Jinwoo doubled the security, his men patrolling the grounds, their eyes sharp and vigilant. He trusted no one outside his inner circle, no one except for Taeyong. Even his closest allies were on edge, whispering in hushed tones about Jang Miho's brutal reputation. They all knew what he was capable of, and none of them believed Jinwoo would be able to stop him. And it wasn't just the men he had to fear. Ava, his Ava, was slipping further and further away, her eyes haunted with the weight of her past. She spent most of her time with the baby, refusing to let Jinwoo near them, retreating into herself. She never asked about the security measures, never questioned the need for secrecy. She simply accepted that they were trapped. But Jinwoo wasn't ready to give up. He couldn't. One night, after another long day of strategizing with Taeyong, Jinwoo found himself alone in his office, staring at the walls that had once felt so secure. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, all he saw was Ava, her face, her voice, and the desperate fear that had overtaken her when she spoke of Jang Miho. His mind spun in a dizzying spiral of thoughts. What had gone wrong? He had thought he was strong enough to protect her. He had thought his world of fear and control was enough to shield her from everything. But he had underestimated her past, and he had underestimated the man who had haunted it. The door to his office creaked open, and Taeyong stepped inside, his expression grim. "Boss," he said quietly, "there's something you need to see." Jinwoo stood, his eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Taeyong handed him a folder, his fingers tight around the edges. "It's from one of our sources. It's a video." Jinwoo felt his stomach tighten as he took the folder and opened it. Inside was a flash drive. He stared at it for a long moment before inserting it into his laptop. The screen flickered to life, and his breath caught in his throat. The video was grainy at first, but there was no mistaking the figure standing in the middle of the frame. It was Jang Miho, and he was standing in front of Ava. The clip was short, only a few seconds long, but it was enough. Ava's eyes were wide with fear. She was sitting in a chair, bound and gagged, her face pale, her body trembling. Jang Miho was speaking to her, but the sound was muffled, the words barely audible. What was clear was the unmistakable cruelty in his gaze. "Boss!" Taeyang's voice was barely a whisper. Jinwoo couldn't take his eyes off the screen. His heart slammed in his chest as rage filled every inch of him. Jang Miho had touched her. He had hurt her. And he had no idea the hell he was about to unleash. Jinwoo's mind raced. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. How had this happened? How had they gotten so close? "The baby," Jinwoo whispered, more to himself than to Taeyong. "He has to know about the baby. That's why he took her." Taeyong nodded, his eyes filled with frustration. "He won't stop, boss. He's ruthless." "I know," Jinwoo spat, his voice filled with venom. "But I'm going to stop him. I'm going to make him pay." The rage was all-consuming, burning through him like a wildfire. The weight of the situation felt unbearable. Ava, the woman he loved, was in the hands of a psychopath. And he had been too slow, too distracted, too blind to see the danger until it was too late. Jinwoo slammed his fist into the desk, his frustration turning to a fury he hadn't known he was capable of. He couldn't lose her. He couldn't lose this. Not after everything. For the first time since Ava had walked away, he felt completely powerless. He had always been in control, always had the upper hand. But now he was up against someone he couldn't control. Ava's face, pale and terror-stricken, haunted him as he paced the room. Every second counted. Every minute he wasted meant more time that Jang Miho had to hurt her. He grabbed his phone, dialing Taeyang's number with shaky hands. "We need to move now. Get every man we have. We're going after him. Boss, we don't have much time. He's already making moves. I don't know how long we'll have. I don't care. We move now. No more waiting." Jinwoo's voice was cold, deadly, a promise of violence that would leave nothing but ashes in its wake. As he hung up the phone, he turned back to the video, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes burning with a promise. Jang Miho had taken everything from him once before. He would never make that mistake again. Ava was his. And no one, not even Jang Miho, was going to take her away from him. Have you ever felt completely helpless in a situation where you couldn't protect the ones you loved? How did you cope with that feeling? Let me know in the comments below. The night stretched on as Jinwoo assembled his men, his mind locked in a fierce, singular focus. Every minute was critical now. He had never felt so desperate, so driven by a need to fix something. Ava, his child, his family. He had always been a man of control, but now, in the face of Jang Miho's madness, control seemed like a distant memory. Jinwoo's hands were shaking as he strapped on his weapon, his gaze hardening. He was no longer the man who had pushed Ava away, who had let his empire blind him to everything that mattered. No, the man standing in front of his men now was someone completely different. The man he would need to be if he was going to save Ava and their son. As he gave orders to his men and prepared to leave, he took a moment to step away from the chaos, standing alone in the hallway. The weight of everything pressed down on him. He could feel his heart pounding, each beat a reminder of what was at stake. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his thoughts, to silence the rush of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. In that quiet moment, something clicked within him. The thoughts, the feelings, the weight of his choices, it all came into focus. He had been living for power, for control, for his empire. But all of that meant nothing now. The true power, the only thing worth fighting for, was right in front of him. It was Ava. It was their child. Jinwoo opened his eyes, a fire burning in his chest. He was no longer the man who hid behind his empire. He was the man who loved, who would do anything to protect those he cared about. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about love. And love meant sacrifice. It meant doing whatever it took to fix what he had broken. He turned, a new determination setting his jaw. There was no turning back now. He had spent too long running from the truth, running from the things that mattered. He would not lose Ava. He would not let Jang Miho take this from him. He had to make it right. As Jinwoo prepared to leave, he found himself standing in the doorway of Ava's room. She was asleep, the soft rise and fall of her chest a quiet comfort in the midst of the storm that raged around them. Her face was peaceful for once, but Jinwoo knew it wouldn't last. Not with Jang Miho out there. He stepped into the room, his footsteps silent, and stood by her side. For a long moment he just watched her, allowing himself to feel the weight of everything he had almost lost. Everything he had taken for granted. Her words from earlier echoed in his mind. "I need you, Jinwoo, but I can't go back to what we were. Not unless you're willing to change." Could he change? Could he truly let go of the empire, the life of violence and control that had defined him for so long? He took her hand gently, his thumb brushing over the back of her fingers. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Jinwoo," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with uncertainty. He looked at her, his heart full. "I'm not going anywhere, Ava. I'm staying. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I promise." Ava's gaze softened as she took in his words, her lips trembling with emotion. There was fear in her eyes, but there was something else too. A flicker of hope. "Jinwoo, you don't have to do this alone," she said, her voice still fragile. "We can fight this together. We can take him down." Jinwoo nodded, his resolve hardening. "We will. Together." For the first time in what felt like forever, Jinwoo allowed himself to believe in the possibility of a future. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with obstacles and enemies, but with Ava by his side, with their son waiting for them, he was ready to face whatever came next. "Rest," Jinwoo whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'll make sure nothing happens to you. I won't let him hurt you again." Ava closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, Jinwoo saw the weight lift from her shoulders. The fear wasn't gone, but there was a glimmer of trust that, together, they could face anything. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, his heart lighter than it had been in years. They had been through so much, but now they had each other. And that was enough. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Taeyang. "Boss, we've located Jang Miho." Taeyang's voice came through the line. "We have him cornered. It's time to end this." Jinwoo's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. The moment they'd all been waiting for. He could feel the tension in the air, the final pieces falling into place. He looked back at Ava one last time, and with a deep breath he walked out of the room. There was no turning back now. It was time to end this, once and for all. The night air was thick with tension as Jinwoo's team descended upon Jang Miho's hideout. Every muscle in his body was coiled tight, a beast waiting to be unleashed. The plan had been set in motion hours ago. Every detail, every move calculated. This would be the final confrontation, the end of a game that had gone on for too long. Jinwoo stood at the helm, his gaze focused on the shadows that loomed ahead. This wasn't just about power anymore. It wasn't about territory or control. This was personal. This was for Ava, for their son, and for the man he had chosen to be. The man who would never allow anyone to threaten his family again. "Boss," Taeyang said, stepping up beside him. "We're in position. Ready when you are." Jinwoo gave a single, decisive nod. His heart was pounding in his chest, but there was no fear. Only fire. Only the certainty that he was doing the right thing. Fighting for the only thing that had ever truly mattered. As they moved in, Jinwoo's mind flashed back to the countless battles he had fought, to the enemies he had crushed, to the cold and calculated moves that had built his empire. But this time was different. This wasn't a fight for power. It wasn't a fight for dominance. This was a fight for love. For a future he was willing to risk everything for. The doors to the hideout burst open, and chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out, but Jinwoo moved through the storm with precision, his men following in tight formation. His eyes were fixed on one goal, one man. Jang Miho. They found him in a dimly lit room, sitting in the center like he owned it, his back to them. He was surrounded by several of his men, all of whom immediately turned to face Jinwoo and his crew. But it was Jang Miho who stood out, his smile twisted in a way that made Jinwoo's blood run cold. "You finally came," Jang Miho said, his voice mocking cold. He didn't even turn around as he spoke. "I was wondering how long it would take you to realize that you can't run from your past. Not even you, Jinwoo." Jinwoo stepped forward, his expression a mask of fury. "This ends tonight, Miho." Miho's laughter was sharp, cruel. He slowly turned to face Jinwoo, his eyes glinting with malice. "You think you can stop me? You think you're going to protect her? Your precious Ava? You're too late." Jinwoo's jaw tightened. "Don't ever speak her name again." Miho's smirk widened. "I have everything you love, Jinwoo. Everything. And you're too weak to do anything about it. You should have left her alone. But now she's mine." The words stung, but Jinwoo didn't flinch. He was done listening to Miho's twisted games. It was time for action. With a single gesture, the chaos erupted again, but this time, Jinwoo's focus was razor-sharp. His men took care of the rest of Miho's gang while Jinwoo advanced, his eyes locked on the man who had tormented Ava's life. He moved with purpose, his every step measured and deliberate. The world around him was a blur of gunfire and shouting, but none of it mattered. As he closed the gap between them, Miho's eyes flickered with recognition. The fear was there, but it was too late for him to do anything about it. Jinwoo reached him in seconds, grabbing him by the throat and slamming him against the wall with a force that rattled the room. Miho gasped, struggling to break free, but Jinwoo's grip only tightened. "You will never touch her again," Jinwoo growled, his voice low and dangerous. "And if you ever come near my family again, I will destroy you." Miho's smile faltered, replaced by a sneer of defiance. "You can't protect her forever, Jinwoo. She's always going to be mine." But Jinwoo didn't hesitate. He slammed Miho into the wall once more, his fury unrelenting. "You're nothing but a coward. You always were. And now you're finished." With that, he pulled out his gun, a cold resolve in his eyes. In one smooth motion, he pointed it at Miho's chest. The air was thick with tension as they stared at each other, the weight of everything that had led to this moment hanging heavy between them. Jinwoo had faced countless enemies, but none like Miho. This was personal. This was the moment when he could finally make things right. But as he stood there, gun in hand, he realized something. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. This wasn't about power or control. This was about ending the cycle of fear and violence that had defined his life. With a steady breath, he lowered the gun, his decision clear. "You're not worth it," he said, his voice steady. "You'll rot in a cell for the rest of your life." Miho's eyes burned with hatred as Jinwoo turned his back on him. The threat was clear. Jang Miho would never be a part of their lives again. Not now. Not ever. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, signaling the end of the fight. Jinwoo motioned for his men to secure the area and prepare for the police. He was done with this part of his life. The man who had built an empire on fear was no more. The dust had settled. The chaos was over. The sirens were fading in the distance as the weight of the final confrontation lifted off Jinwoo's shoulders. Jang Miho was in custody, and the threat that had loomed over him and Ava was finally, irreversibly gone. Jinwoo stood alone in the aftermath, staring at the city skyline beyond the estate. It was a different view now, one that felt more clear, more open. He had always thought that power, his empire, was the only thing worth fighting for. But tonight, he realized that he had been wrong. The empire, the control, the fear. It all meant nothing compared to the life he was building with Ava and their child. He had been blind for so long. He had let his world of violence and fear dictate his choices. And in doing so, he had pushed away the one person who truly mattered. But now Ava was safe. And their son, the child who had brought them back together, would grow up in a world where he was loved, where he would never have to fear the darkness that had ruled his father's life. A soft voice broke through Jinwoo's thoughts. "Jinwoo." He turned, his heart lifting when he saw Ava standing in the doorway, her eyes still tired but filled with something new. Hope, warmth, and a trust that had taken root. She was holding their son in her arms, cradling him close as if he was the most precious thing in the world. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jinwoo smiled. He walked toward her slowly, the weight of everything they had gone through settling between them. But this time it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a beginning. Ava looked at him, her eyes soft, vulnerable, but steady. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jinwoo nodded. "It's over. For good this time." Her eyes searched his face for a moment, as if looking for any sign of the man who had once been consumed by power and violence. But the man standing before her now was different. He was a man who had fought for what mattered. A man who had finally found a purpose beyond himself. Ava took a step forward, her face still filled with uncertainty. But as she met his gaze, the walls that had been between them for so long began to crumble. She moved closer, her hand reaching out, and Jinwoo didn't hesitate. He pulled her into an embrace, his arms wrapping around her and their son, holding them close as if he could protect them from everything that had ever threatened to tear them apart. "I'm sorry," Ava whispered, her voice breaking. "I should have told you sooner. I didn't want to bring you into this world. But now I see that we can have a future. Together." Jinwoo's heart swelled with emotion. "You don't have to apologize, Ava. I was the one who pushed you away. I was the one who didn't see what was important until it was almost too late." He kissed the top of her head softly. "But we have a chance now. A real chance. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." Ava looked up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never wanted to be afraid again, Jinwoo. I never wanted to live in the shadows. But with you, I believe I can have peace. We can have peace." Jinwoo smiled, the weight in his chest lifting. He had spent his life building an empire of fear, but now with Ava by his side, he would build a new kind of empire. One built on love, on trust, and on the promise to always protect the ones he loved. As he looked down at their son, the tiny life he had never known he was missing, Jinwoo felt something he had never felt before. True happiness. There was no more running from the past, no more hiding behind power. This was the future. Their future. Ava smiled, her eyes filled with affection as she looked up at him. "What now, Jinwoo? What's next for us?" He looked out at the world, his gaze steady and calm. "Now we live. We live without fear, without regret. And together, we'll make sure our son never has to fight the same battles we did." Jinwoo pulled her close, holding both of them, his family, tight. "This is just the beginning, Ava. We're going to build something beautiful. Something that can't be broken." Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.